Now, the Gauteng Health Department is in the spotlight again for a baby swapping incident at Sebokeng Hospital. A family is now considering suing the department after the mother says she was given the wrong baby to bury after her newborn died. The patient says she gave birth to a girl and the body that she received was a boy. How can this family receive justice in this situation? Let's discuss it further with medical law expert Siraaj Khan joins us in our studio this morning. And we're also joined via our video link by Joanna, Kleovoulou, who is a clinical psychologist, and she's also the founder of Psych Matters. To both of our guests, thanks very much indeed. And Siraaj, thanks for coming into studio.
Thank you for the invite.
I mean, it's horrific to have a baby swapping incident, but this case contains a whole other level of horror.
Absolutely. I'm familiar with cases of baby swappings, but not in the instant where a child has actually passed away. So a unique set of facts to me.
In your experience of other baby swapping incidents, medically speaking, or let me rather say legally speaking, what kind of recourse is there available to a family?
Yeah, so we have two reported cases in terms of South African law. We have the Clinton Parker case and the Centre for Child Law case. And in both cases, it was common cause that they could sue the MEC for health for damages for psychological trauma. So we have precedent for that in terms of South African law. Of course, that is in terms of the law of delict. You would have to establish negligence on the part of the nursing staff, for example, and the MEC will be held liable in terms of vicarious liability as the employer of that particular nursing staff or that particular hospital. So we have precedent in South Africa for the awarding of damages in terms of those two cases which I've mentioned.
So, Joanna, awarding of damages is one thing. It's a whole other discussion to talk about getting justice and then what a family goes through in a situation like this.
Absolutely. Research on this type of impact of this type of bereavement as a trauma has emphasized significant negative psychological and health outcomes. For example, especially with mothers that have lost their child in such an incident, the risk of psychiatric hospitalization is on the increase, particularly in the first 3 to 5 years of a child or a baby's life. The risk of accidents and mortality through accidents are at risk, and death, as well as stress and lower immune systems and poor health choices due to this type of traumatic loss.
Yeah.
So yes, the impact of this is widespread. It affects their relationships. It affects the working through of a funeral ritual in terms of working through the needs of what a funeral does for the healing process. So absolutely, the outcomes are massive and significant and very disrupted.
Sure. Siraaj, you were telling me off air that thankfully these kinds of baby swapping incidents are few and far between. How many do you know of sort of in recent history?
Yeah, just in terms of reported judgments, there are just the two that I've mentioned, so it's very difficult to get accurate information. Of course, these matters could be settled before going to court. There could also be instances where they are not reported at all, so it's very difficult to get accurate stats on these type of cases.
I mean, that would be the concern, right? That it's underreported.
Absolutely. And something needs to be done about it as well.
Because, I mean, in my mind, you know, a swap might happen and you may discover that swap happened immediately, or you may discover it many, many years later because of something like a blood test. And so your child doesn't match your blood type or your DNA or whatever the case may be. So the case numbers may well be quite higher. How do we get to the bottom of that, Siraaj?
Yeah, it's very difficult. We have to employ better standards at hospitals, I suppose, and hopefully these judgments where damages are awarded against the minister serve as a deterrent and ups the standards at the hospitals.
Yeah. I mean, Joanna, in a case where damages are awarded, one just feels like that is such little comfort, right? This case that we're talking about this morning, where the mother was actually given the wrong body to bury, this is one case, but insofar as swapping is concerned in general, you know, if I discover that my child has been swapped and I'm reunited with my biological child, whatever the time frame is after the swap had happened, how does that impact bonding, psychology, the mother's future, the child's future, the family's future?
You know, if we think about the very early years of a baby's life, we talk about building a sense of trust and a sense of safety in the world and a sense of belonging. And when that has been disrupted, it affects the child's attachment, it affects the mum's identity in terms of who she is and the sense of meaning that she has of her life. And when that has been disrupted, it's a great shock, and it's a great, it impacts your world and your sense of who you are in this world, not only for the baby and where they belong, and as well as the mother and the family at large. We talk about disrupted attachments and how that impacts, how you feel safe in the world, and how, we talk about outcomes in terms of, if you've got a disrupted attachment style, your neurological, biological, as well as psychological stance of who you are. We talk about sociopaths and people that behaviorally cause, crime, go towards crime. So this is not just, let's just put the puzzle pieces together. It has a profound societal impact as well, and the way it's woven into the patterns of who we are as a society.
Yeah.
So this is not just something that we can just put to bed and just imagine that it's okay.
Yeah.
So yes, it's really important that we have those measures in place from early on.
No, absolutely. So it's not just a case of, Joanna, let's look at two scenarios here. If a child is reunited with their biological family, shall we say in weeks, in a matter of a few weeks, is it possible then to still, for the mother to now bond with this, mind you, the mother has already, and the family have already bonded with what is now someone else's baby. Is it possible for you to say, as the mother and as the family, this is now my biological child, and let me do what I can now to start that bonding process weeks later?
I think there are two aspects. The one is that if the baby's still alive, we've heard of baby swapping, and the infant or the child or the young adult discovers that they grew up in the wrong family, or there was child kidnapping and so forth. There's a whole other ball game that we need to consider in terms of who is my family, why did this happen, and so forth, and really unpacking the history and the storytelling behind that and why, and having to reconcile that. But if it is a deceased baby and the family have discovered, or medically there's been a discovery that there's been an error, there's going to be a shock, and we're going to the disruption in the grieving process is going to be uncovered. So there's going to be a traumatic grieving process, and the meaning that we make, and family members that came to grieve the baby. What about the baby that wasn't grieved? The public and the family connection and the extended family ritual. So there's going to be a disruption, and there's going to be a delayed response in the grieving process.
Yeah.
But it also depends on, the psychological well-being and wholeness of the family prior, and the meaning that the family have made before, and any risk, the psychiatric risk of a family system already at risk. So we have to look at all those variables in terms of how do we make meaning of this, and the resilience of the family, and the support of the family and identity of the family. So we really need to look at that and all those aspects when we're having to look at potentially a forensic assessment in a medical legal case like this.
Yeah. So it's just a whole range of things that play into how a family is able to cope and recover with something, Siraaj, which is just, it's awful beyond comprehension, right? And when the court does look at a case like this, and there is this case now for damages, does a court take all of this into consideration, just how absolutely horrific it is, and that actually any damages claim would not be enough?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very difficult situation. The courts obviously will look at previous precedents, like the matters that I've mentioned, but some of those cases are outdated as well. I mean, one of the judgments that I mentioned, the Clinton Parker case, was back in 1996, and the damages awarded was about 150,000 rand. So, as you say, probably insignificant in the broader scheme of things. And in terms of assessing the evidence, yes, of course, expert witnesses will be called in and looking at all that cumulatively.
Yeah, absolutely. Joanna, just final thoughts, just insofar as, tightening up hospital procedures, tightening up security procedures. I mean, are we now to tell new mothers, people who are going in to have babies, that it's now your responsibility to ensure that the baby that you have is actually your own?
I think it's a mirror reflection of the times that we find ourselves in terms of accountability and responsibility. We look at failed systems as a whole, and do we just, put our hands up in the air and become very defeatist, or do we take matters into our own hands? And I think it really is important that we need to be aware that these things do happen. We don't want to be creating unnecessary anxiety for a mother that's just had a baby, but now who's having to deal with postpartum grief as well. But I think it is a joint effort in terms of let's all be aware, let's all be awake,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
let's all take hands in terms of being accountable from the time of giving birth and exiting the hospital room. The hospital. So I think it's just, for me, really a reflection of the times that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
And taking accountability and being aware.
Absolutely. To both of our guests, thank you so much for coming into studio. Siraaj Khan is a medical law expert, and joining us via our video link there, Joanna Kleovoulou is a clinical psychologist, and she's also a founder of Psych Matters.